I remember the way the air smelled that morning. Like burnt toast and cheap coffee. When I first heard the words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about myself, I was sitting at my aunt's kitchen table, the one with the uneven leg that always rocked if you leaned on it too hard. The sunlight was cutting through the yellow curtains in slanted strips, catching the dust in the air, making everything look strangely fragile, as if it could all collapse with just one wrong movement. My Aunt Clara was fussing with the sugar bowl, her hands trembling slightly the way they always did when she had something on her mind. I knew her since I could remember. She was the woman who bandaged my knees, packed my school lunches, scolded me when I stayed out too late. She wasn't just an aunt, she was my second mother, or so I thought. She looked at me with those pale blue eyes, the same ones I always thought I had inherited from her side of the family, and her lips pressed together, like she was holding back a storm. "There's something you should know," she said, and her voice cracked in a way that made my stomach twist. I had just turned 25 the week before, and maybe she thought I was finally old enough, strong enough, to hear whatever secret she had been hiding all these years. She reached for my hand, her skin paper thin and warm, and I felt that surge of unease you get when you know something bad is about to come out. "It's about your mother," she whispered. I frowned, confused, because in my head she was talking about my mum, the woman who raised me, Lydia. My mum, who smelled like lavender soap, who wore her hair in a tight bun and always corrected my grammar. Clara took a long breath, her chest rising and falling as though the words themselves weighed her down. She isn't who you think she is." My heart thudded against my ribs, and I pulled my hand away, suddenly cold despite the summer heat pouring through the window. She kept talking, words spilling out like a dam breaking. I barely processed them at first, because my mind was trying to keep up, to make sense of something that felt like it had no logic. "Lydia is your grandmother," she said. My ears rang, the room tilted, and I thought maybe I misheard. I laughed, but it wasn't really a laugh, more like a broken sound, sharp and bitter. "What?" I managed. Clara's lips trembled. "She raised you as her daughter, but she's not your mother. Your real mother is—" She paused, and I could see her eyes glisten, her throat working to push the truth out. "Me." The silence that followed felt like a knife pressing against my skin. I stared at her, my mouth dry, my hands clenching the edge of the table as if I needed to hold on to something solid or else I would float away. My aunt, no, the woman I had called Aunt Clara my entire life, just told me she was my real mother. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, each second dragging out, making the air in the room feel heavier and heavier. "That's not funny," I said, my voice shaking. "That's not something you joke about." She shook her head quickly, desperately, her thin hair brushing against her cheeks. "I'm not joking, sweetheart. I swear to you. I carried you. I gave birth to you." Her voice broke, and she pressed her fist to her lips, as if trying to hold herself together. My first instinct was denial. My mind flipped through all the memories I had of my so-called mother Lydia, the bedtime stories, the strict rules, the way she would cut apples into perfect slices for me. It didn't make sense, because Lydia felt like a mother in every way. How could she have been my grandmother? And Clara? She was the one who babysat me, who picked me up from school sometimes. But she didn't feel like a mother. She felt like, well, an aunt. My chest hurt, like my heart was swelling too big for my body. "Why? Why would you do that?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Clara's hands were trembling as she reached for her cup of coffee, spilling some on the saucer. But she didn't seem to notice. "Because I was 16, she whispered, looking down. "I was a child myself. Lydia, your grandmother. She thought it was better that way. She said she could give you stability, that no one would question her raising another baby. Everyone thought you were hers, and I became your aunt. I felt the blood rush to my face, a hot wave of confusion and betrayal. All those family photos on the walls, the birthday parties, the holidays, they were built on a lie. I remembered one Christmas when I was maybe 7 years old. I had gotten sick after eating too many candy canes, and Clara sat with me all night, stroking my hair, humming softly while I cried. At the time, I thought she was just being kind, like an aunt should be. But now, with her confession, that memory twisted into something else, into a picture of a mother tending to her daughter in secret, hiding the truth from the world. My whole life replayed in my head like a movie where I suddenly realized the main character wasn't who I thought she was. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand why no one thought I deserved to know. Instead, I sat frozen, hearing her words echo again and again. I carried you. I gave birth to you. I pushed my chair back so fast it scraped against the floor, the screech making both of us flinch. My body felt like it didn't belong to me, my legs shaky as I tried to stand, my chest so tight it hurt to breathe. I walked to the window and stared out at the backyard, at the patch of overgrown grass where I used to chase fireflies as a kid. And all I could think was, everything I remember has a different meaning now. So all those years, I said slowly, turning back toward her, all those times I thought you were just helping. It was because you were my mother the whole time. Clara nodded, her face pale, her hands folded together like she was praying. Yes, every scraped knee, every time you cried, every time you came to me instead of Lydia, it was because you were mine. But I wasn't allowed to tell you. She wouldn't let me. The way she said she made me realize the power my grandmother had always held over us. Lydia was the type of woman who filled a room with her rules. She was stern, sometimes cold, but she made everything seem orderly, respectable. I thought it was just her way. Now I understood it was control. So she lied to me my entire life? I asked, my voice rising. Clara looked down at her lap, ashamed. She thought it was for the best. She told me I was too young, too irresponsible, and in a way she wasn't wrong. I was scared, I was ashamed. But I never stopped being your mother in here. She placed her hand over her chest. I remembered being 13, sneaking out one night to a party, and when Lydia found out, she grounded me for a month. But it was Clara who came to my room later, sitting on my bed, whispering that she understood, that she had made mistakes too. Back then, I thought she was just being the cool aunt, but now I could see the layers beneath it, the secret connection, the bond she couldn't name out loud. Tears blurred my vision, but anger was burning hotter than the sadness. You both decided for me, I said. You never gave me a choice to know the truth, you let me live a lie. Clara stood, reaching for me, but I stepped back. The space between us felt like a canyon. I wanted to tell you so many times, she said, her voice breaking. But she threatened to cut me out completely if I did. She said you'd grow up hating me if you knew. Her words echoed, and for a moment I almost felt the weight of her fear. But the betrayal was louder. My whole identity had been rewritten in a single morning, and I didn't know if I would ever forgive either of them. I couldn't stop shaking. It felt like my body was rejecting the truth, like every nerve inside me was on fire. I paced the kitchen, my shoes tapping against the faded linoleum, the smell of coffee now nauseating. Do you know what this feels like? I snapped, turning on Clara. Do you have any idea what it's like to find out your whole life was a lie? She flinched, her shoulders curling in, her voice small. Yes. Because I've lived that lie every single day right alongside you. For a second her answer cut through me, because I realized she wasn't wrong. She hadn't just been lying to me, she had been lying to everyone, including herself. I thought about the time she'd look at me with this strange sadness, like she wanted to say something but swallowed it down. I always thought it was because she was lonely, or just the kind of woman who carried invisible burdens. Now I knew the burden had been me. When were you going to tell me? I asked. When I had kids of my own? When Lydia died? Or never? My voice cracked on the last word. She shook her head. I wanted to tell you when you turned 18, I begged her. But she said you needed stability, that hearing it then would ruin your future. She promised we'd tell you together one day, but that day never came. Her words made my skin crawl. Promises, lies, secrets. They had all been made about me, but never with me. I sat back down because my legs couldn't hold me anymore. I buried my face in my hands, trying to piece together who I even was. Memories clashed in my head. Lydia teaching me to bake cornbread, Clara helping me with homework, birthdays with one woman at the head of the table and the other hovering in the kitchen. I remembered once, when I was about 10, a classmate had asked why my mum looked so old compared to the other mums. I laughed it off back then, but later Lydia snapped at me for repeating it, her face turning red with rage. And Clara? She had hugged me that night, whispering, "Don't listen to them. Families come in all kinds." I thought it was just comfort. But she knew. She always knew. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, but under it there was also this sick, gnawing ache, because part of me still loved her, no matter how twisted the truth was. That was the worst part. I couldn't just erase the bond we had, even though I wanted to. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, each creak sounding like a taunt. My phone buzzed with messages from friends asking if I wanted to go out, but I ignored them. How could I explain that my entire world had been turned upside down in a single conversation? I kept replaying Clara's words, her trembling voice saying, "I carried you. I gave birth to you." The phrase looped in my head like an echo I couldn't escape. I tried to picture her younger, 16, scared, hiding a pregnancy. My stomach twisted because the image didn't fit the woman I knew. But then again, I never really knew her at all, did I? I thought of Lydia, the woman I had called Mum for 25 years. Strict, controlling, sharp-tongued at times but reliable. She was the one who made sure my grades were good, who pushed me to get into college, who kept the house spotless like a museum. And now I had to see her as my grandmother, the one who forced her own daughter into silence and raised me under a mask. I remembered the smell of her lavender soap, the way she clicked her tongue when I left dishes in the sink, the long lectures about responsibility. Suddenly those memories weren't maternal. They were manipulative, a performance of motherhood that didn't belong to her. I sat up and grabbed an old photo album from the shelf, one of those thick ones with plastic covers that stick to your fingers. I flipped through page after page. Baby pictures of me in Lydia's arms, toddler pictures of me holding Clara's hand in the park, family Christmas photos where Lydia sat tall and stern in front of the tree, while Clara lingered in the background, smiling too brightly. My eyes burned as I realized it was all there, the truth hiding in plain sight. Clara always looked at me with something deeper than an aunt's affection, but I had been too young, too blind to see it. I slammed the album shut and hugged it against my chest, my tears soaking the plastic cover. I wanted answers, not just from Clara but from Lydia too. I needed to hear it from her mouth, to look her in the eye, and ask how she could live a lie for so long. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and typed out a message to Lydia. "We need to talk. Tomorrow." The next morning I drove to Lydia's house, my knuckles white around the steering wheel the whole way. I hadn't even brushed my hair properly, just threw on a sweatshirt and jeans, because all I could think about was the confrontation ahead. The streets I'd grown up on looked strange to me now, like I was seeing them through different eyes, as if every tree and crack in the sidewalk had been complicit in the lie. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a long moment staring at the front door. The same one I had walked through countless times, carrying backpacks, shopping bags, heartbreaks, and celebrations. It suddenly felt like the entrance to a stranger's home. She answered the door in her robe, her hair pinned back the way she always wore it in the mornings, and for a second she looked exactly the same as always. That almost broke me. "You knew," I blurted before she could even say hello. Her eyes flickered just for a second, but I saw it, the crack in her armor. "Come inside," she said calmly. Stepping aside like this was just another conversation. I followed her to the living room, where the floral couch sat perfectly aligned with the coffee table, a bowl of fake fruit still dust-free as if it were polished every day. Everything about the house screamed control. "Clara told me," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "She told me you're not my mother, you're my grandmother, and she's my real mum." Lydia's expression didn't change much, but her jaw tightened. She sank into her chair with the dignity of a queen sitting on a throne. "I see," she said. I told her not to say anything yet. Rage shot through me like lightning. "Yet I'm 25 years old. When exactly were you planning on telling me? On your deathbed, never?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't understand. She was a child, 16. She had no way to raise you. I stepped in because it was the right thing to do." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "The right thing to do was give me the truth, to let me know who I am. Instead, you let me grow up believing a lie. Do you even realize what that does to someone?" For the first time, her voice wavered. "I gave you stability. I gave you a life. Without me, you would have had nothing." Her words hit like a slap. Maybe she believed them. Maybe she had convinced herself over the years, but to me they sounded like justification for stealing my identity. I looked around the room, at the photographs of me framed neatly on the walls, graduation, prom, family gatherings, and realized every single one was staged under her version of the truth. I stood there in Lydia's living room, surrounded by the ghosts of my own life, and I felt like I was suffocating. The walls that once felt safe now seemed to close in on me. Every framed photo stared back like evidence of her control. "You didn't give me stability," I said slowly, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "You gave me a cage. You locked me in a story that wasn't even mine." Lydia's eyes narrowed. She had always hated being challenged. "Watch your tone," she snapped, her voice sharp as broken glass. "That old command used to make me shrink, but not anymore." "No," I said firmly, surprising even myself. "You don't get to tell me how to feel right now. You lied to me. For 25 years you lied to me every single day." Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair, knuckles white. "I did what I had to do. Clara was irresponsible, immature. She could barely take care of herself. I wasn't about to let her ruin your life before it even started." Her words stabbed deep, not just because of what she said about Clara, but because it was said so coldly. I thought back to moments when Lydia's criticism cut me, the way she'd dismiss my feelings or decisions. I used to think she was just strict, but now I saw it for what it was, control masked as protection. "You didn't protect me," I said, my voice cracking. "You stole me. You stole my right to know who I am." Lydia leaned forward, her eyes icy. "And who would you have been? The daughter of a teenage mistake? Do you think people wouldn't have whispered? Do you think life would have been kind to you with that truth?" My chest ached as I realized she had convinced herself of this version for so long she couldn't even see how cruel it was. "It wasn't your decision to make," I whispered. "It was mine." My legs felt weak, but I refused to sit. I needed to stand, to anchor myself in this moment where the lies were finally unraveling. For the first time, Lydia looked smaller to me. not larger. Her authority was slipping, and she knew it. Her lips trembled slightly before she masked it again. "You'll thank me one day," she said quietly, almost like a warning, but I knew I never would. That was the moment I understood there was no apology coming, no acceptance of guilt, no moment where she would admit she had done wrong. I wasn't going to get closure from her. I would have to find it myself. When I left Lydia's house, the sunlight outside felt harsh, almost cruel. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't start the engine right away. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but instead I just sat there with tears streaming down my face in silence. It felt like every truth I had ever believed had been burned to ash. Eventually I drove back to Clara's, the road blurring through my tears. Her small house came into view, the same flower pots on the porch, the wind chimes clinking softly like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. When she opened the door and saw my face, her eyes filled instantly. "You told her," I said bitterly, stepping inside. She shook her head. "I didn't have to. You know she never admits fault." I sank onto her couch, my body heavy, exhausted from carrying emotions that didn't even have names yet. Clara sat beside me, cautious, like she didn't know if she was allowed to comfort me. For years, that had been our unspoken rhythm. Her love held back, her touch hesitant, her heart restrained because of Lydia's rules. Now the truth was out, and yet it still felt like there was a wall between us. "Why didn't you fight her?" I asked suddenly, turning to her. "Why didn't you take me and raise me yourself? You're my mother. Why did you let her steal me?" Clara's face crumpled, her hands twisting in her lap. "Because I was terrified," she whispered. "I was 16, and she was so powerful. She made me believe I wasn't good enough, that you would suffer if you were with me. And part of me believed her, because I wasn't ready. But every day, I regretted it. Every single day." I stared at her, trying to process the mixture of anger and compassion swirling in me. She was my mother, yes, but she had also been a coward. I remembered all the times she comforted me quietly, in the shadows of Lydia's dominance. Like when I came home crying after my first heartbreak and she sat with me on the porch, rubbing my back, telling me love could hurt but it was still worth it. She gave me the kind of wisdom mothers give their daughters, but she always delivered it like an aunt, never claiming what was truly hers. "Do you even know what it feels like to not know who you are?" I asked, my voice breaking. "To look in the mirror and not even recognize the person staring back at you because suddenly your whole life has been rewritten." Clara reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. "Yes," she whispered, "because that's been my life too." The days after that felt like I was drifting through fog. I went to work, answered emails, smiled at coworkers when I had to, but inside I was unraveling. Every task felt meaningless because I kept circling back to the same thought. Who am I really? I caught myself studying my reflection in the bathroom mirror at work, tilting my head, wondering if my eyes looked more like Clara's or Lydia's. I used to be proud of my resemblance to my mum, now grandmother, but now it felt like a costume I'd been tricked into wearing. Nights were worse. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying childhood memories in my head with this new, twisted lens. The way Lydia scolded me for little mistakes. The way Clara's hugs always lingered a second longer than anyone else's. The Christmas when Lydia gave me a dictionary and Clara gave me a necklace with a tiny heart charm. I still had that necklace, tucked in my jewelry box. It had always felt like more than just an aunt's gift, and now I understood why. One evening I finally dug it out. I sat on my bed turning it over in my hands, the metal cool against my skin, and I started to cry. Not angry tears this time, but something softer. Grief maybe, or longing. I wanted to hate Clara for her silence, But when I thought of all the little ways she had been there for me, the hatred cracked. She hadn't abandoned me completely. She had loved me in the only way she was allowed to. And yet that didn't erase the betrayal. The conflict tore at me, two truths clawing at each other inside my chest. I decided I couldn't carry it alone anymore. The next morning I called Clara and asked her to meet me at the park near her house, the one with the duck pond where she used to take me when I was little. We sat on a weathered bench, the wood creaking under us, the air smelling faintly of wet grass and pine. For a while neither of us spoke. Ducks splashed in the water, children laughed in the distance, and it all felt surreal compared to the heaviness between us. Finally I turned to her. "I don't know how to move forward," I admitted. My voice was barely above a whisper. Clara's eyes glistened and she nodded slowly. "I don't either, but I want to try if you'll let me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw not just my aunt or even my mother, but a broken woman who had made impossible choices, who had lived with shame and silence, and who now desperately wanted her daughter back. And I didn't know if I was ready to give her that. I spent the next week torn between two urges: to cut both of them out of my life completely, or to demand more answers until I understood every detail of what happened. My friends noticed I was distracted, and when one of them asked if everything was okay, I almost spilled everything right there in the middle of a cafe. But I stopped myself, because how could I explain it in a way that didn't sound like a soap opera? My aunt is actually my mother, and the woman I thought was my mother is my grandmother, who lied to me my whole life. Even saying it in my head made me feel sick. I realized I couldn't just bury it and pretend to move on. The truth had ripped open a hole, and pretending it wasn't there would only make it deeper. So I decided to confront Clara again, not to accuse her this time, but to hear the full story, the part she hadn't told me yet. We met at her kitchen table again, the same place she had first dropped the truth like a bomb. She had made tea this time, like she was trying to soften the edges, but I wasn't in the mood for comfort. "Tell me everything," I said firmly. "From the beginning. No more half-truths. I deserve the whole story." She nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around her cup. She told me about being 16, about sneaking around with a boy she thought she loved, about the moment she found out she was pregnant, and how the world seemed to close in on her. She described Lydia's rage, the way her mother's voice sliced through her like a whip, the endless reminders of how much shame she had brought to the family. Clara cried as she described giving birth, and then immediately being told to pretend I wasn't hers, how she was handed the role of aunt before she even had the chance to hold me properly. My stomach churned listening to it, but I couldn't look away. I needed to hear every ugly detail. She confessed that she wanted to run away with me once when I was 2, but Lydia threatened to make sure she never saw me again if she tried. Fear kept her silent. Love kept her close. It was a prison made of both. When she finished, her face was streaked with tears, and she looked at me with pleading eyes. "I know I failed you," she whispered, "but I loved you every moment of your life. Even when I wasn't allowed to call myself your mother." For the first time I felt something shift inside me. The anger didn't vanish, but it wasn't the only thing I felt. There was also grief for the young girl she had been, for the life we had both been robbed of, and maybe, just maybe, the smallest flicker of understanding. After Clara's confession, I walked home under the streetlights, my mind racing with a storm I couldn't calm. The night was warm, cicadas buzzing in the trees, but inside I felt cold and raw. I kept hearing Lydia's voice in my head, calm, controlling, unapologetic. "You'll thank me one day." That single sentence made my blood boil. I realized then that she would never feel guilt, never admit she was wrong. She had stolen not only my truth but Clara's chance to be a mother, and she wore it like a crown, proud of her power. I thought of all the times Lydia had humiliated me in front of relatives, All the time she had silenced Clara with just a look. All the years she dictated every part of my life, from what clothes I wore to the college I chose. It was control dressed up as guidance. I had lived in her shadow without knowing it, and now I wanted out. But more than that, I wanted her to know she no longer held power over me. I wanted revenge, not the kind you see in movies with dramatic gestures, but something quieter, sharper. I wanted to take away the thing she valued most: control. The idea grew in me over the next few days, settling like fire in my chest. I stopped answering her calls. When she showed up at my door unannounced, I didn't let her in. I could see the confusion on her face when I refused to obey, when I didn't bend to her will. For the first time, I had power. I also started telling the truth to others in the family. Cousins, uncles, even distant relatives who had no idea. Their shocked faces mirrored my own when I first heard it. Whispers began to spread, and with each retelling, Lydia's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Her reputation as the strong, respectable matriarch was dissolving, and she hated it. I knew because she called me one night, her voice shaking with anger, demanding I stop airing dirty laundry. But I didn't stop. Why should I protect the woman who had stolen my identity? Every time I spoke the truth, I felt lighter, stronger, more myself. Still, even in the fire of revenge, there was a soft ache inside me when I thought of Clara. She had been a victim too, silenced by fear. I couldn't change the past, but maybe I could give us both something Lydia had denied us: the chance to live openly, honestly, as mother and daughter. The final confrontation came on a Sunday afternoon. Lydia showed up at Clara's house, furious, her eyes blazing in a way I'd seen countless times as a child when she was about to unleash her wrath. But this time, I wasn't a child. I was done being afraid of her. Clara stood beside me in the living room, her shoulders trembling but her chin lifted, and for the first time, we were united. "You've ruined this family," Lydia spat, her voice sharp, shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what people are saying about us?" I looked her in the eye, and I didn't flinch. "No, you ruined this family when you decided lies were better than love. I'm not your daughter, and I'm done pretending to be." Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, to slice me down with words the way she always had, but I didn't let her. "You don't control me anymore," I said, my voice steady, strong. "You don't get to tell me who I am, what I should hide or who I should love. That ends today." Clara's hand slipped into mine, warm and trembling, and for once, she didn't hide it. She didn't play the role of the quiet aunt. She stood as my mother, openly, finally. Lydia's face hardened, but there was something else in her eyes too: fear. She realized she had lost. Her power, her control, her secret, it was all gone. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, and the sound echoed like the end of an era. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets. It was a silence that felt like freedom. I turned to Clara, and she was crying, but there was relief in her tears. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered, "how to be your mother after all this time." I pulled her into a hug, something deep and raw tearing inside me as I said, "Then let's figure it out together." In that moment, revenge wasn't about destroying Lydia. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself she had stolen. My revenge was truth, spoken loudly, lived freely. And my conclusion was simple. Family built on lies will always crumble, but the love that survives the truth is stronger than anything else. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. Not just a daughter raised in shadows, but a woman stepping into the light, holding her real mother's hand.